Hey, Shawna, do you notice not only the physical changes that come as we age, but mental changes and relationship changes and how we maneuver those?
They are definitely a challenge as we go in and out of different seasons of our life, how we manage our relationship with ourselves, with our the
Mm.
people around us. And our guest today is Fazilah Shariff. She's a therapist who works with adolescents, parents, and families, and she helps people navigate connection and stress and the complexities of these changing seasons. She's a registered social worker and family therapist, and she has lots of nuggets for us.
And before we dive in, we do want to give a shout out to our Girls Talk Healthy Aging listener, Miss Cindy Gibson. Now let's dive in. Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski. And together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey. Fazilah, we're so happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off as a family therapist. What are the most common emotional, relational challenges that you see women facing, especially moving into midlife? Because that's who a lot of our listeners are, is the midlife woman.
Right. So I would say midlife isn't necessarily just a stage. It's a lot around the reorganization of our identity, of our relationships, and the meaning that we're making from our life, whether we're moving into midlife or we're already in midlife. So there's a few things that I do see in my work in terms of what comes up for women as they're moving into midlife. So that first piece I mentioned is a big part around identity reorganization. So this is a lot of like, parts of me are ending. I don't know who I am. What do I do? I feel lost. That comes up very frequently for women. And with that, they are very much assessing their relationships. What worked for them now may not be working for them now. Or maybe they're facing more intergenerational pressures, where they're taking care of aging parents, and then at the same time, they might be taking care of children. I think there's a big piece that I've heard a lot around from women is around value differentiation. So I don't believe certain things that I was taught before, or I'm figuring out what I want to reject and what I do want to actually internalize and include. Because our society a lot of the time is saying, these are the different things that you need to be in order to be a woman. And so a lot of the time as we're moving through midlife, that we start to define that and we start to question what that might be for ourselves. And then the last thing I hear is this piece around future orientation. So what I mean by that is that this is still like, women are still saying there's still time, but there's not unlimited amounts of time. And so I'm seeing, I know I know that, and it's becoming more of a reality for me in terms of how I feel my sense of time within. So those are the core things that I'm seeing a lot in my work with women.
And what about women feeling that they're maybe becoming invisible as we get to our 40s, 50s, 60s? And I don't know if that might be related to things have been so focused on either children or focused on our looks or focused on, I'm not sure what, but that is something that maybe changes, just kind of questioning, am I seen? Am I heard? And like you said, who am I?
Right. And I think sometimes this piece around feeling invisible can very much be a signal for us. And a lot of the time, at the same time that women are coming into midlife or moving through midlife, what I hear them saying is that I feel invisible on the outside, the external things. But on the inside, I'm actually feeling more confident in who I am. And that duality can really feel like destabilizing for us because I don't think it's necessarily when we're feeling invisible, it's not necessarily a weakness. It's actually giving us a signal to become more aware of who we want to be and the things that we want to do. And sometimes I think that can really feel quite scary, right? I think for many people. And like I said, but there's an exciting piece to it. So when we can sit in that discomfort a little bit, it can actually be an amazing opportunity for us to grow and to understand ourselves. And some of the things that I like to talk to women about is let's reframe this. Midlife is not what is creating the stress. It's actually revealing the adjustments that we need to be making, and maybe possibly right now or later on. It really depends on where we are at. And it's often at this stage when women are realizing, I have that wisdom within me, and I don't have to keep carrying on the same way that I already have been. And again, that can feel empowering, but it also feels not that great. It can kind of feel yucky, right? Because we don't know exactly what to do with that. And that can feel scary.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like a realignment or looking at our values and what we want and who we are, just really rediscovering ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I think can really support us is processing what we may have been silently enduring. Sometimes, a lot of the time, what I'm hearing from women is that this is not something that I'm going to do anymore, or that I'm going to tolerate anymore, right? And so that is really coming true for them because they're starting to understand more about their own identity and their wants and needs, and sometimes are able then to silence what some of those external pressures are. So it becomes that recalibration of our relational roles. It really looks at how are we building regulation into our daily lives so that there's some things we may need to tolerate and some things we're going to say, at this point, I'm not going to do that. If we do it all at once, that is really hard and it can feel just mentally overwhelming. But when we can take it in steps, it actually can become quite a bit easier for us to do that in small steps.
How does that affect our relationships?
Yeah, so that good question. Depends on the relationships, right? And so sometimes when we can see that for the people who are in our lives because they really care for us and not necessarily the function we have in their lives, that can really make a big difference in how then we can start to look at our relationships, the ones that we want to hang on to more and the ones that maybe we don't want to. But again, there are stages in which that can be helpful to do because sometimes we may not be ready to let go of certain relationships, and for other relationships we want to bring that closer because we now know more about who we are and what we want people to see within us.
We're going to interrupt this interview for just a second because we've got something we want to make sure that you know.
If you're struggling with your health, with your fitness, if you don't know where to start or you know what to do and you're not doing it, we're here for you.
And all you need to do to get our help is to reach out to Shawna and I at our email, sapodcast23@gmail.com. And we're happy to help and we will be in touch. Now back to the show.
I like how you've repositioned this invisibility that many women feel as we age in this youth-centered kind of society that values youth over everything, that you should be looking younger, and so as we age and we age naturally, we get wrinkles, all the things, and advertising, marketing is pushing us to, buy all these products, etc. to because aging is terrible, apparently. And so, but I like the way that you've positioned it to be like, this is an opportunity because as our external starts to fall away, really the value of us is internal. And when we can focus on that internal, then we're going to feel a lot more satisfied and visible and valued. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And I think when I think some of this is about, and it's kind of easy to say in like a hypothetical way, right? But when we really look at it, what can we do? That comes down to what you're talking about around normalizing the transition, right? So it, instead of seeing this as a phase where we're being erased, it's actually a phase where we can reposition ourselves, and we can redefine what we want. And I think that is the language that really matters, right? Because society, like you said, is saying, oh, we're getting wrinkles. This is, you know, our bodies are, all of these kinds of things, and they're valuing youth. But actually, what the data actually shows is that women in their midlife are feeling the best and the strongest that they can, that they have been in at any other stage in their lives, because they know themselves better. They have that experience. And what a wonderful thing to have, right? To have those experiences and be able to learn from them and grow from them. So when I was talking about this piece around, like, you know, what do we internalize and what we don't, sometimes it can be really hard then not to internalize those external messages of, this is how we should be looking, this is how we should be dressing, this is the, you know, we should be compliant, we should be smiling all the time, like those kinds of things. But actually reclaiming what's important to us sometimes means silencing, for example, on, if you're on Instagram, silencing the posts or the creators where they are saying these things and you're like, this is not necessarily fitting for me. Like I need to kind of keep that away from me right now as I try to figure out what is important to me versus what society is telling me should be important to me.
It's interesting that you say, Fazilah, that research shows that midlife women feel the most confident. And yet, at this time with hormonal changes that our women are feeling, that's an interesting statistic, because I think that a lot of the experience I have with my clients, I don't know about you, Alli, but what you're hearing and seeing on socials of everybody talking about how they've got brain fog and confusion and, you know, all these terrible symptoms related to menopause, it seems not congruent with I'm feeling the most confident as ever. What do you think?
Yeah, good, really good question.
I mean, I guess two things can be true at the same time.
Exactly. And those are true at the same time. There's many shifts that are going on for us physically, but because we have that life experience, we're able to say, and we're able to weed out things. We're able to make certain relationships, like I said, stronger. Or we're trying to keep certain people away from us more. So those are happening at the same time, and I think that's why it can feel so destabilized. It can feel really confusing. It's like my body's doing this, but my mind is doing this. Why? Like, what is going on with me, right? And I think that's where we can feel like that sense of instability.
Yeah.
So I think this is I think a huge part of what I work with people on. We're shifting from being valued for what we were doing to valued to who we are, which I talked about before. So some of this may look like, where am I actually seen in the world? That might also look like doing kind of micro things for ourselves. Whether that, like, something, there might be a micro kind of thing that we do around, like, what is something that's creative for us, where we're using our body and mind, for example, like yoga or something like that, where we're using our body and our mind at the same time. So small things like that can actually increase our confidence. It can increase our confidence in our physical bodies, but also in our minds. So there might be moments where we're saying, okay, but like, it's not jiving together, but there might be other moments in which it is. And so that can be a helpful kind of reframe to look at, well, what are the things that are working more? And there are other things that I hold that it's not really working.
So I think you're talking about creating that connection that mind-body connection, that this body is still mine. I'm still in control of certain aspects of my body, even though, all right, I've got these unexpected hot flashes and night sweats that come randomly, and that I don't know when they're coming, when they're leaving. So there are certain aspects of my physicality that are seemingly out of my control. But I, maybe it is calming to be able to find those things that can connect mind and body, whether it be yoga or, maybe going to the gym, maybe being out in nature, maybe going for a walk, but doing something physical. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, that is a big part, is that mind body connection. And you're right, it doesn't feel great when we don't know what's going on with our bodies. When those hot flashes are coming, we don't know these things, right? But what we can control and what we can focus on, what we can control, can make all the difference in how we experience that duality that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it's humbling. Like when we go through changes or we're out of control or feel out of control or loss of control, there's something that's humbling about that probably also reframes our brains and helps us to find new opportunities and new places, because there is that loss of control in certain areas, and there is that things are changing that are maybe we've always cared about, how our face looks in the mirror, and now we just, look in the mirror like, wait a minute, what is this, this new line or this new whatever. And so there's something humbling about that also changes us, I'm thinking.
Yes, and I think when, Alli, when you're saying, like, when we're looking in the mirror and we see something different, or we're seeing, more lines and things like that, who is telling us that is different, like not okay, or who is telling us that that's problematic? And that goes back to what I was saying around, maybe this is looking also at what we internalize and what we decide we don't and we resist against. So if I'm getting more lines on my face, right, is that okay? Maybe because I'm smiling more. Like, I don't like the lines around my face, and I look at them in the mirror and then I think, well, you know what? That's probably because I've been smiling a lot. Like, and I sometimes have to just try to brush it off, because if I focus on it too much, then that also bothers me, right? So it's also what we're focusing on, not just necessarily what we're internalizing and what we decide not to.
And I think it's just that realization is like things are changing. Like if we're being honest, like things do change as part of aging, and that is something that we have to come to terms with, and it is humbling. I find that true for myself.
Absolutely. I think there's exciting change, right? There's these changes when you're saying, like, for you and Shawna are both talking about in terms of the physical changes, right?
But I think those things also change us internally, because we're physically changing that because we're humbled by that, it actually starts to change our mental state as well.
Absolutely. I agree. It does. It does.
And that could be to the positive or the negative. Yeah. And so I think it takes a mental discipline to guard yourself and be self-aware that, hey, when I do X, I feel terrible about myself. Maybe I should reconsider doing X. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said about social media, if certain creators make you feel badly about yourself and not valued as an older woman or a mature woman, follow people or surround yourself with people that help you feel more valued.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one point I really wanted to make, that Shawna, you really hit it on the nail there, is that who in our lives are actually starting to think the way that we're thinking about ourselves, right? And who are those people that we want to then draw closer, and who are the people that maybe that doesn't necessarily, what they're talking about in terms of their physical, like their physical appearance, that doesn't necessarily work for us. And so when we can draw the people in that maybe might be distant, but we're drawing them in, or who are already within our inner circle, that can really help us to hear the messages that we feel are going to be more empowering for us. and the messages of saying of this, like, you're amazing, right? These are the things that we love about you. That can actually help us, even if we don't believe it ourselves. That actually can make a powerful impact in terms of the people around us. But if you think about it, if we're also hearing the people who are saying, and we have too much of this information from people who are saying, don't like yourself, I don't like this about myself, I don't like this about myself, that also then impacts us, right? It brings us down too. So it's being very intentional about how we are moving through that.
And I think this message that you're saying applies to any season of life, particularly as we go, but especially as we go through destabilizing changes like menopause, where we feel this disconnect between the confidence that we have because we are starting to know ourselves better mentally, but physically we look in the mirror and we like look at our body and wonder, well, what's going on? Mm-hmm. So surrounding yourself with those positive messages and positive people is especially important. So what is your suggestion for that woman that's listening right now that doesn't feel like they have that social network of positivity? What are your suggestions to find that?
Yes. So if sometimes, sometimes there's at least one person, and that doesn't mean they need to be within our inner circle. There can be one person who maybe we've interacted with a few times and we don't really know well. They're in our outer circle. Or we thought, oh, I really like what they're saying or how they're thinking about, their bodies or things like that, right? A lot of the time there is one person. So as an example, I met with, I would say like a friend, but mentor of mine. And a lot of what I had talked to her about was around like professional related things. But I thought recently, I would like her to kind of be a little bit more in my, like a little bit more in the inner circle, because I do trust her judgment. There's actually things that sometimes I don't agree with her about, but I like that I don't agree with her about these things. Because either, and because I can have more of that challenge of understanding me better when someone doesn't necessarily agree. But it's still easy enough for me to like email her or text her to meet up. And so that's what I did, because I was like, I want to talk about some more like personal related things that are related to professional work, but she's not in that circle. So that was me trying to like kind of bring her into that a little bit to get to know me. But the thing is that was a risk. It was a calculated risk, right? I had to be vulnerable and be like, hey, you want to meet up? There's something I really want to bounce off of you, or I wanted to talk to you about. Like, so that required vulnerability from me. And that felt scary. That didn't feel easy to do. But I also felt like, I really feel like this nudging feeling that this person would actually be a really good person to talk to. So I was following both. I was following that, oh, this feels really uncomfortable and risky, but also that this might actually be a good risky. And so that's, I think, where when we can see that alignment, that can really be helpful.
And I think that sometimes we tell ourselves that, oh, this friend of mine, I've been friends with this person for 20 or 30 years, and yet that friendship is not necessarily serving us because we're in a different season, and it's okay to let some friendships go. It doesn't mean you have to have some big blowout or anything, but we're moving into a different season and bringing along people that are in that season with us, surrounding ourselves. So like you said, making that risk, finding people that are resonating with you now. And if people are in remote communities, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that they live next door, because we're on Zoom right now. Alli's in Georgia. We're in Calgary. There's lots of ways to connect with people.
Yes, absolutely. As you were talking, I was thinking more about what does connection look like for us, and that's going to be different for the settings that we're in. Sometimes that might mean Zoom. Sometimes it might mean we're in a big city, And we feel like a certain conversation, we feel more comfortable having over Zoom because it's a little bit different than having that in-person conversation. There's also, when you're saying like maybe there's certain things that we let go of in relationships or certain relationships, there's a grief that comes with that too, right? And that's where a lot of the time I talk to women about sitting, again, like I said before, sitting in the discomfort, that this feels really uncomfortable. And I am sad that maybe this relationship that was in my inner circle is now in one of the outer circles. And there's definitely a grief around it. So, and then the other piece I think is that sometimes we have these relationships for 20 or 30 years, but we feel that we might be judged, right? And sometimes we don't have evidence that we would be judged. We just feel that way. So then it's harder for people to actually know what's going on for us. So sometimes the mutual sharing and starting slow to see, okay, if I said that, what did that person think? Did I feel that judgment, or did they understand that? Or maybe they didn't understand it, but they're listening to me. They're hearing what I have to say. Right. So I think that is a really very much another piece around those relationships. It's okay that there will be movement, but then along with that is going to come the grief around it.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever had to let go of a relationship or move those people into different, outer circles?
Yeah. And it is sad, but it's also, it is also liberating. And it's not that it just is what it is, because people grow at different times. And if you do not allow yourself to grow, then you're going to feel that discomfort, and that discomfort is telling you something. So to be able to, and you know what? People don't want to sit in discomfort. They want a quick fix and a Band-Aid or a glass of wine and it'll all be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and then figure out, well, what does that mean?
Yes. There's, sometimes I talk to parents about this analogy when they're in terms of, sometimes when we allow our kids to learn, it's about seeing that it's okay that they have this discomfort, right? And for us, then there's this discomfort. So kids are learning that. They're learning that discomfort is okay. So it's very natural for us to say, I need to fix it. I need to fix how this looks like so that I don't feel that, right? So, and sometimes out of necessity, we need to do that. But there are certain situations where that may not necessarily be the case. We can allow ourselves to sit in the discomfort. And that's hard for everyone. So I think sometimes also, again, when we're going back to like our relationships, if there are certain people we can talk to and say like, this is really hard, and they're talking to us more about it instead of trying to fix it, perhaps those are relationships which we feel that we can gravitate more towards, because people are listening and they're not necessarily saying these are the things that we should do to fix it. And that can, again, like you said, it can be really freeing. It's an opportunity.
Fazilah, what about stress, caregiving, unresolved family dynamics that maybe accumulate over the years? Maybe switching gears a little bit, but still talking about relationships, these things that are tough that maybe we've been dealing with, and now we're at this point where we're rediscovering ourselves and realigning our relationships. Do you deal a lot with folks that are in that boat, and how do they maneuver themselves and those that they have a relationship with, even though they might be changing relationships or shifting relationships?
Well, I think that the question here is, what has not ever been processed, or what have we maybe processed at certain times but not allowed ourselves to fully process, right? So there's a psychological impact around this when there are things that are unprocessed. So there's more chronic stress. So we might increase our risk of anxiety, depression, or even burnout. Sometimes there's unresolved like family patterns or conflicts that are resurfacing. And that might be because our values are starting to change, right? We're, like we talked about, we're starting to question certain things. So that's why sometimes those things at this time of life is coming up. And then over time, we're creating that emotional weight. So it makes it harder for us to focus. It's harder to make decisions. And then there's also this physical manifestation, and Shawna had touched on this too. Things like our bodies are changing. So for example, when we have stress hormones like cortisol that are in our bodies for long periods of time, that can contribute to fatigue, disruption in our sleep, maybe even weight gain, right? And so then at the same time, we're juggling all of these other things around caregiving responsibilities. And so sometimes then the body is starting to signal to us, this is too much. Like this is too much. Like I don't know what to do. It's feeling so overwhelming. So a lot of the time that can be a signal of, okay, if there is something that we haven't necessarily like processed, or there's unresolved family dynamics, what might be okay for me to try and process now, and what am I not ready for, and then where I might need some professional help. Right? It really depends on what the type of unresolved dynamic is. So what I like to think of is this analogy that I talk to women about is, and it's commonly used around the emotional load, feeling like we're carrying a backpack and there's like stones in it, and we accumulate this weight over time. And so if there's something small, if our bag is already heavy, and there's like something small, like a small rock goes in, it can feel a lot heavier because we haven't necessarily processed what has gone on for us. So, and if it's a large one, sometimes it just like the backpack just splits open because we're feeling like this is just way too much. So what I'm trying to really get at is that when we're looking at these family dynamics, it's about what we feel we're okay to start working through, what we may need to shelve, and where we need that professional help, like I said.
Yeah, and I think the key is that last piece, that we don't have to do it alone. That if you feel that the slightest pebble being added to your plate or your backpack is overwhelming, then you might be at a point that, hey, I need some help to sort these things out. And there's no shame in that. And that's probably where you work a lot.
Yes. And this is, what the takeaway for me that I'm hoping people can take away from this part of our conversation is that healthy aging isn't just about our exercise or diet. It's also about managing the emotional load that we're carrying, whether that's about family dynamics or other things. So this becomes, again, about questioning what we're internalizing and what we're resisting. But then this is noticing, like, what are the small actions that we can take? So sometimes we need to guard ourselves, right, in certain ways. And so we're not ready for that. And in other ways, we may be ready. And so when it comes to this midlife point, again, it's not just about the physical part, but it's about the psychological part, because those are very much integrated in how we move through the world.
Yeah. I was curious, I want to move back to where you were talking about when someone is, where there's a value in sitting in discomfort.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how parents don't like, I mean, I'm a parent and I know when my child, when they were younger, or even as young adults now, they're going through a difficult season, and it's just so hard to not want to fix it for them. So how does one, whether it be your partner, your husband, your aunt, like when you see someone going through a difficult season and they're sitting in this discomfort, how do we not fix them? How do we sit in the discomfort of witnessing their discomfort? Because that discomfort for them is valuable. How do we appear loving and supportive without being a fixer?
Yeah, the active listening and practicing active listening. So sometimes it might be as we are talking to people and we're noticing that they are going through this discomfort. One, it could be checking in with them to see like what's going on, how is it going, but really how is it going. The other piece is also as we're talking and we're listening, we are practicing active listening, right? Because a lot of the time we're listening to respond to people. But when we can shift that to listening to what they're actually telling us, that can be a huge shift in how then we relate to people. So it might be catching ourselves in the act to say, oh, I might have started to fix. Let me kind of step away from that, right? I might be giving suggestions and maybe that person doesn't want the suggestions. Sometimes it can be saying upfront, are you looking for me to listen? Or would you really like me to be able to provide more ideas of what can be done, right? So that can help us then to sit with the discomfort, because if we know that person just wants to listen, it's easier to engage in the active listening, because then we know they're not looking for us to fix it. They're actually just looking for us to be in it with them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and sometimes we may need to start the conversation with a fixer when we're wanting to talk, to say, this is actually what I want from this conversation. I really just want you to listen and hear what I am saying. Right? There is a piece around reflective listening that can be really powerful. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's when someone says something. Say if I'm talking, say Shawna, you're talking to me, and you're wanting to share, okay, this is what is going on for me. My role then is to actively listen and then reiterate what it is that I heard from you based on what my perspective of what I heard, right? And then it would be asking that person, am I getting this right? Or maybe am I off track? I use that a lot in my work with women. Am I right or am I off track? And then that person has an opportunity to respond, or sometimes they might expand on that. And so when we can use that cycle, that circle, it actually can help us to create more deeper conversations without going into fix-it mode. And
Yeah.
that can be really hard. Sometimes, like when I've had people practice this in my office, they go to like responding to what the person is saying. And so it's kind of checking ourselves to say, wait, maybe it's not about responding. Did I respond in that? Okay, if I responded in that, fine, or I tried to fix it. Let me try again. Let me try to really understand what they're trying to say to me.
Yeah.
Again, it's not about being perfect, because if we're in fix-it mode, sometimes it's hard to unlearn that, but it's through small moments that we can try and unlearn it.
Yeah, and I think it's all about better communication. And as a family therapist, this is probably the root of many issues between partners, between parents and children, is the miscommunication. Because I'm of the mind that many people just have good intentions, but it's misinterpreted through miscommunication of some sort. So if you can, I really like the active and reflective listening suggestions, whether you are the fixer or the person that just needs the ear, and just clarifying, hey, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. Clarifying that.
Yes, absolutely. And if we want to go deeper into that, what is the discomfort that is coming up for us when someone is sharing something? Like, why do we feel uncomfortable with that?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're ready to ask ourselves that, and sometimes we're not ready to ask ourselves that. But that's like the deeper layer that can then help us in our interactions when we are sharing or when we are listening, right? Without judgment.
Yeah, because if you're a people pleaser and you've made someone feel uncomfortable because of a boundary maybe they've crossed, and that you're trying to hold a boundary, it's important that you don't just please that person by just saying, oh, no, it's fine. It's like you need to let them be sit in that discomfort. It's a difficult thing.
It's difficult. I'll give you an example, a simple example. So I was sitting somewhere with a bunch of like acquaintances and some friends, and a couple of the ladies had brought up something about like, oh, like I wish my thighs were smaller, like I want the gap in my, like I want that gap. And like that is a generational thing, right? Because that was talked about at a certain generation. And so I was like, this is really bothering me. Like, why? Even though I knew it wasn't right, I'm like, why is this bothering me? Right? Like, what is coming up for me? Are there certain memories that are coming up for me? Like, are there certain things, like, why is this actually irritating me? And what I realized is that because those messages never felt right for me ever, but yet they were kind of pushed down like my throat, right? When we were younger, especially like as a millennial, these were messages that we were getting. And so even for that, even though I knew it was not what like felt like it was not the right message that I wanted to hear, at the same time, it was like, why is it bringing me discomfort? And that discomfort was because when I was younger, I was told you need to be skinnier and you need to look a certain way, right? And so that really helped me to be like, okay, I'm just going to move this way in the conversation because this way is not really working for me.
Yeah.
Right? It's just simple acts like that, but the depth of it was helpful for me to understand.
Yeah. And the whole idea of active listening, of really hearing of what you have to say rather than just creating my response and waiting for my turn to speak.
Yeah. Or it might be exiting the situation.
Or correct. I'm out. Exactly.
Yeah.
Fazilah, if you had a wish for our listeners today, what would it be?
My wish would be tending to our whole system, to our mind, our body, and our relationships. And with that, with intention, but also with curiosity. That would be my hope.
Alli?
And my wish would be that we embrace and enjoy the transformation through the different stages and ages and find something positive to focus on instead of all the things that we don't like.
And mine is similar in that understanding that some of those uncomfortable feelings are okay and they're a cue for us to maybe focus on something different or learn something new.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback. If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.